Good evening, everyone. I see we have some people joining us. My name is Kathleen, and I am the Marketing Director for AIM at Melanoma. And really quick, I just want to share a couple little housekeeping rules with everyone. First, I want to thank Melissa and Dr. Ormond for spending some time with us tonight. They are very gracious. It's 7 o'clock here on the East Coast, and this is their personal time, so we're very grateful that they're spending some time with us. So there's a couple options for questions. We have a lot of people in attendance tonight, so we're going to ask at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A button. If you have questions during this presentation, please feel free to use that button to ask your questions. We are going to try to get through as many as we can, but please know that we have the questions. If we can't get to them, we're going to save them, and we will make sure that we answer them maybe offline. We're going to be recording this tonight, and it will be available on YouTube in a couple days. So you can go back to it, you can share it with your friends, you can post it on your own pages. That would be great. And then the last thing is immediately following this webinar, you'll receive an automatic survey. That is really helpful to us. It's very quick, and one of the things we'd like to know is if you have ideas for other content, for other programs, how can we help you? What do you want to hear about? So if you can take a few minutes, please feel free to fill that out. Also, if you have any additional questions for either of our guests tonight, feel free to put that, and we will make sure that they receive that. So with we're going to start, and I'm going to introduce Melissa, and I know everyone knows her, and she will take it from there. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see all of my, well, I can't see you anymore because of this new platform, but it's so nice to be able to come and talk to everyone. I have a very special guest tonight. This is a topic that I've been so looking forward to, partly because I think it's a really important thing that we need to address, but also because I get to work with someone who I always describe as one big giant hug. So Ellen and I have worked together for a really long time. She immediately, you'll see, will put you at ease. Like, you just feel better when she's speaking. So she was the perfect person to ask to come on and talk about this topic. Originally, we had thought that this was going to be solely about how do we manage our feelings as survivors. But kind of in light of how everything is going, we're all sort of surviving this whole COVID experience together, not only as melanoma patients, but as humans. Survivors encompass such a big group of people, and a lot of times, I think personally, survivors kind of get mixed into just the people that have survived or their cancer is cured. And I really don't think that that's the case, especially in melanoma. Thankfully, we have a lot of treatments for stage 4 patients that are putting them into remission or a state of no evidence of active disease. And truly, these are survivors, and you're in follow-up, and it's scary, and you don't know what's going to happen. But this also applies to people that have done adjuvant therapy, to folks that have had their surgery, whether it be an enucleation or a disfiguring mucosal surgery or a cutaneous surgery where they had lymph nodes removed, or even just a melanoma in situ that's been removed, and now you're in follow-up. All of these behavioral health and anxiety and depression and all of these things are important to everyone, really. So what we decided to do is kind of morph this survivorship talk into not only the feelings that you get as a survivor, but also as you get in this really angsty, unknown time that we call COVID. So I know in terms of from a medical side, these topics come up all the time. And so Ellen and I sat together and we kind of came up with a list of a couple of things that we wanted to try to address. And then certainly we'll try to get to your questions and make sure we cover everyone tonight. So Ellen, kind of what are patients saying, from a behavioral health standpoint about living with cancer and with COVID right now? What's the big topics?
So I've been staying in touch over the last 6 weeks with my patients through telemedicine, phone visits, so things are a bit different. but there has been a really consistent theme that initially surprised me. The very first person said this, and it's gone on through all of these weeks, is for people with cancer and survivors, they often say, actually, this isn't very different from what I'm doing day in, day out. I live with uncertainty about the future. I live with thoughts about dying. I live with trying hard to avoid germs and keep myself safe. So it's actually kind of like my everyday life.
Right.
Said, kind of, welcome to my world, to the rest of the world. So that's been a pretty consistent theme. I think the thing that's always so important to realize about COVID is it's also brought about some major life changes for people. And these are very different circumstances depending on the situation. It can be, if you've always been a bit of a somebody who was an introvert and enjoyed being alone, this actually might be just a great time. You don't have to go to all those parties or see friends. But I think for a lot of people, that there are these major stressors of financial stressors that are just huge. And I think that adds a big deal. It has nothing to do with medicine and COVID. And then I think the other thing is people's family circumstances are really different. People are finding themselves living with a lot of people that they may not have been living with in the past, or the exact opposite, being separated from people that they relied on for comfort. And so I think it's important when we're talking about COVID to realize it's not any one experience. Sorry, got a phone going off here. But they're really just huge individual differences. I've also noticed with time, and I think this is sort of like the experience of initial diagnosis of cancer. In the beginning, there can be, after the deer in the headlights, like, okay, I can do this. We're gonna be able to do it. And then it's like, no, I'm getting kind of tired and irritable. This is getting old. And so I'm definitely finding that with people. The other thing is that incredibly touching and moving things are happening in the midst of all of this. And I think about, all the stories people have told me of their grandchildren going to all this trouble to, draw chalk drawings in the parking lot. So I think it's this mixture of very scary things and very lovely things that are happening.
It's a good thing. So one of the things I know in a medical setting that we're running into quite a bit, and it's because of all the visitor restrictions that are being placed by medical centers right now, a lot of our patients are unfortunately coming to their visits by themselves, or being admitted to the hospital for acute events by themselves. And I know, at least, and I'll start with this, and this is kind of how this is going to go. We're going to kind of go back and forth. I'm going to talk about the medical part. Ellen's going to talk about the behavioral health part. Because I think it's kind of both. And one thing that we found is that the more the patients communicate with us about their needs, the better we're able to take care of them. So like some things that we've been doing is a lot of telemedicine visits, like having people go get their scans and then go immediately home, not to come up to clinic and have us give them scan results by themselves. So go get your scans, go home, and then when you get there, let us know. We'll call you and do a video chat like this with your family, so you can sit beside your loved one and hold their hand and feel supported. And or vice versa, if they feel like they don't need to be physically near their loved one, we're having them, call from the parking lot downstairs and call in and just be the listening ears for the patients when they can. We're typing up discharge papers for them so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do, because when you're sitting alone getting information, I know it can be really overwhelming, and you can attest to this. People just don't hear things when they're getting all of this information. So we're trying really from a medical side to make sure that we're keeping everyone's caregivers involved and in the loop, and because it's just about as much about the patient sometimes as it is about the caregiver. So we're kind of trying to take everybody together in that sense. So, but you have to tell us that you need help. So, and that might be one of the suggestions I make, because a lot of folks that listen to these webinars and live streams.
Yeah.
Maybe going to a community hospital to get their treatment where there aren't a lot of melanoma patients going that you can kind of form camaraderie with. So my advice really is to talk to your doctor. If this is something that like you're struggling with, the only way someone's going to know is if you tell them. So
yeah, I think that's so, and I, Melissa, when I was talking to you a bit about this before, and you had so many great ideas about what people could do. And I think one thing is also thinking about in a doctor's visit, the questions that you have prior to the visit and what questions your family members have, and actually bring those questions in with you. It's like the second person with you on a piece of paper, and at the same time making sure you have a way to communicate with your family members out in a parking lot. It's something, and I don't know if people out there are having this experience, but one of the really moving things that I've heard patients say, these are patients both going in for treatment as well as going in to talk to their medical teams. They are relying more emotionally on the medical teams, and the medical teams have really been there. I'm looking at you. I don't know if I'm going to be the family that's going to be there with this person. I don't know if you've had experiences like that, but it just meant so much to patients.
Yeah. And the hardest thing for me right now is I can't hug anyone. So, the folks that are watching that know me or maybe are my patients, that's the most difficult part of my job, is not being able to give you a snuggle whenever we have to talk about hard things. And so, I mean, we're definitely finding that we are definitely being the support system for patients a lot of the times now, and in the triumphs and also in the sadness. And, what is really important for me is like, how do we, from a clinician standpoint, how can we make this better for you? And so what advice would you give to a patient in terms of preparing themselves, other than, the notes and stuff like that, to come into a appointment? Like, how do you mentally prepare yourself for, I got to go to this appointment or this treatment or this scan by myself? What do I do?
I think it's like a lot of things with COVID, and it's one is just accepting that it's going to be hard. And I think for all of us, that acceptance that things are hard, we don't want them to be, but it's I think mentally saying, okay, what can I draw from inside myself to get me through this? I think of a patient who was going to have a scan that was going to give important information that would, depending on how things were going to go in the future. And we talked about walking through that front door to the hospital, going into the scanner alone. And in the case of this person, it was taking a prayer in with her, that was a comforting prayer. So thinking ahead of what am I going to take with me. One thing, actually, I thought I used to work with children, but one of the things that can work really well is a physical object from someone you love.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And it can be a book, it can be a piece of jewelry, it can be clothing, but there's something very comforting about those physical objects. I think one other thing, Melissa, that I'm getting a lot from my patients related to comfort is they're terrified of getting COVID. And so one of the things I've done in my work is to try hard to help people have a realistic sense that, yes, this is dangerous, but the likelihood of catching it, if you take all the proper precautions, are very, very low. And so I work to help people have realistic expectations. But I'm wondering if you could say a bit about what hospitals are doing to protect patients in your sense of, are they safe when they come in to see it?
Of course. So I know in the beginning, whenever things were kind of running a little bit, I don't want to say rampant, because I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, thankfully, in our most areas outside of New York City. But I know that in the beginning, we really restricted, follow-up patients and folks that were, in the higher risk group for other reasons outside of their melanoma, like age and, if they were immunosuppressed for some other reason. just to kind of cut down on the total number of people that were there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then at least our center right now is masking everyone. I think that that's a pretty universal practice, at least right now. You know, patients and providers are all masked the entire time. And that's something that, you know, is extremely helpful, and really, especially because of the asymptomatic spread. So like from a medical sense, the transmission rate without a mask, if you are sneezing and coughing, is like somewhere around like 20% or something like that. And with a mask to catch all of the things, it's like less than 2%. So just the simple act of everyone masking, or most people masking, you're cutting the transmission rate down by almost 100%. It's like 90% cut. So I would say, and the other thing to keep in mind is that masks don't protect yourself, they're protecting other people. So really, this is like everybody has to join and be a team and protect everyone else. But I will say, and this is something that people sometimes have talked, or, you know, is a little bit of a misnomer, but we talked about extensively in my other lectures, melanoma patients aren't at more risk than the general population. So regardless of whether you have stage 4 disease or stage 1 disease, melanoma in situ, ocular, mucosal, it doesn't matter. As long as you're not on steroids, from a melanoma standpoint, you're not at more risk than anyone else. It really comes down to those real strong comorbidities, age, you know, kidney disease, other things that make your immune system kind of not great. So, and I think half of the battle, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is knowledge, you know, like knowing what the facts are, because there's so much scary information out there, and there's people on Facebook and your great Aunt Sally who's saying to do things and not do things. So I think preparing yourself and asking good questions, and, you know, call your provider. They'll tell you whether or not they think you're at risk. And I think knowledge in this case is power. So Ellen, there's actually a question in the queue. Which I think we kind of already addressed sort of in this thing that I am talking about. It's, you know, people have stage 4 disease, and they also are on treatment with a chemotherapy. You would be a little bit of immunocompromised, Nancy, if your counts, if your white blood cell count is low. So it's not your melanoma that makes you immunocompromised. It's that Temodar pill that truly might be making your blood counts low. And that kind of applies to everyone. So unless you're on a treatment that is making your white blood cell count lower than normal, you are not immunocompromised. And, you know, that kind of goes without saying. And then Lori, actually, Miles, I think it is, wanted to just say she already feels better knowing someone else understands how hard this is. And so that's sort of the whole point of this, I think. Is to let everybody know you're not alone. So
it's absolutely. I think also just and Melissa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the fine line of walking this balance that, yes, COVID is very dangerous and we have to be very, very, very careful. But the other side of it is when you, most people, even if they get it, are very, very safe. And when you read the literature, it's kind of interesting, even with cancer. The patients with cancer who end up dying from it, which is, I think, what everybody's worried about, are people who are already very sick and very frail. It's right. News wants to make you think that people who are dying are these healthy, perfectly fine people, and they are dying occasionally. But it's, in general, the people who are dying, including with cancer, including people who are immunocompromised, are people you would immediately identify as sick and frail.
Correct. And that's really important, because I think that plays into the whole hyped up anxiety that everyone is feeling. And so, know that really even, 20% of people will develop symptoms that even make them go to the hospital. So one of the things is that you just need to keep telling yourself, this is what's true. I'm not more at risk because I have melanoma. I am in control of all the things that I can control. I can control wearing a mask. I can control talking to my doctor. I can control the things that I do. and know that unfortunately you can't control the virus. And so the best thing that you can do is control yourself, I think. I don't know. I have a lot of anxiety in my life, so I practice this every day.
I am an anxious person. I think one of these I've actually found helpful, and I think it's trying to balance. I'm an anxious, worrying kind of person. But if I start to think about it, and for all of us, we do something almost every day, or at least pre-COVID we did, which is extremely dangerous, and that's to drive. There are 35,000+ people a year that are killed in automobile accidents. But all of us know that the risk of any of us dying is relatively low, and we go about our life. We have a reasonable concern about driving, but we don't stop doing it. So I think it's important with COVID to have that reasonable concern, but also to realize that all the hype we're seeing is the media trying to get our clicks.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's the battle with anxiety in a regular life setting too. So, I mean, it kind of leads us really nicely into our next topic about like, what strategies do you have with, for dealing with that uncertainty, for dealing with that anxiety, grounding, what kind of things do you tell your patients to do?
So one of the things I actually wanted to just start a little bit with is an overall view of coping through all this.
Yeah.
And so then talking about anxiety, because what I heard the other day and did a kind of double take, and it's all of a sudden that if you look at social media, there are these quote super copers with COVID. So they're the ones that have their kids in 15,000 little fascinating exercises every day, or they're feeding the entire community and making masks all day long, or they become super spiritual and are meditating, all day long. So I think it's important to realize that during this, that none of us are going to be super copers. And one of the phrases I love is just be good enough. You don't need to be great, just be good enough. This is hard, and to get through it. I think the other thing is there are no right or wrong emotions. And I think just take worry. I think the important thing is not to worry all the time. Worry some, or to be mischeerful and it's all going to be fine. No, the reality is there are things to worry about and there are things to be hopeful about. And it's finding those, I think, that balance. There are things to be angry about and there are things to be grateful about. So it's having both of those emotions. I think when it comes to worry and uncertainty, one of the things for me is always the serenity prayer, which is give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And there is this concept in psychology that's sometimes called radical acceptance. And I think it is incredibly hard, and this fits with cancer or COVID, to just come to acceptance that really tough things happen. And it doesn't have to do with being cheerful about it or liking it at all. It's just that radical acceptance that things happen. And again, that's not easy. I want to put in a huge plug for distraction. And I think 99% of the time, what you want to do is find ways not to think about this in every possible way you can. And so there's no value in thinking about this all day long. So one of the things, sometimes if you're a chronic worrier like I am, that's a technique you can use, whatever your distraction techniques are. If it's music, if it's meditation tapes, if it's, I was going to say sports, but if it's watching reruns of old sports on television, whatever it is, what you can do is actually schedule periods when you won't allow yourself to worry. Most worriers could worry 24/7. But what you do is you say, I'm going to worry, let's just say every day between 3 and 4, I'm going to go crazy worrying. And then the rest of the day, I'm going to do everything I can to use my distraction techniques. It never helps to tell a worrier, don't worry, but you can schedule it in certain periods of time. and related to the scheduling worry, it can be very helpful with sleeping at night. If you're somebody who wakes up in the middle, can't get to sleep because you're worrying, wake up in the middle of the night. One of the strategies that can help is don't say don't worry about that. Say, I will worry about it in the morning, and then focus your thoughts on something else.
Okay, that's a good thought. And I know that, like, I don't know where I read it, but at some point I had read that your mind can only do one thing at a time. So like if you are worrying or finding yourself like in this, I'm in a swirl of worry, do something immediately to think about something else so that your brain is like, wait, can't do this.
Yeah. You're exactly right. I think it's a really important concept for worriers. We cannot, no one can multitask. You think you're multitasking, you're actually flipping back and forth between ideas. And in Pittsburgh, they have put people in scanners and proved that. They look at their brains when they're doing two tasks at the same time, they're flipping back and forth. You cannot think of two things at once. There's also a technique I saw, which is slightly different, but to deal with chronic stress and chronic worry. This was a businessman who said he ends his day with 3 questions. And the first question is, what am I grateful for? And that's not gratitude with a big G. It's just, I smiled at my child today. So the first question is, what am I grateful for? The second question is, what did I learn today? And the third question is, who did I help?
Sure.
And I think thinking when you're a chronic worrier, you're worrying, forcing your mind to think about these other things also, not instead, but also. So those would be some strategies.
Those are great strategies. I mean, and there's so many. And that's the thing. Not everybody's going to be the exact same and respond the way that I do to stress or you do to stress. And so I think it's good to have options. That's a really helpful thing.
Absolutely.
And sometimes if you're like me and get in a panic, you have to use all of the options all at once.
But actually, so what helps you with worry when you're dealing with uncertainty?
I think when it's something like chronic worrying, it's something that I always try to distract myself, and I have the hardest time at night before I go to bed. Like that's the most difficult time, like when I'm lying down and I don't have 50 things to do. I'm not a school teacher or doing medicine. I'm just laying in my bed, getting ready to relax. And all of a sudden my brain goes, click, 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 click. And what I found helps me in that particular time is the breathing, like 5 seconds in, hold for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds, and really focusing on breathing only.
It's exact, and it's deeply relaxed. Your body will calm if you do that. And I love one of the principles of relaxation, if this can help with what you're saying, is if you relax your body, which is what breathing will do, your mind will relax. Or vice versa, if you relax your mind, for example, I'm going to think about going to the beach, your body will relax. It's a great.
Sure. It's a great one. And then I think like in an acute setting, with the breathing, but if that doesn't work, I do the clench and unclench so that, hold the tension, release the tension. And after 2 or 3 times of doing that, it remarkably works. So, as tight as you can, as tight as you can, as tight as you can. And automatically when you leave go, you feel better. So, our participants, if you're sitting there, try it. It literally works. Like you
actually
just feel this, like, wave of, like,
tense your fists as hard as you can. Yeah. It really, really does work.
Because I think that those things, like right now, I mean, there's chronic worry every day, and your tips are super helpful to deal with all of those things. And I think, and then I think those couple things that you can do, I mean, those are easy things, breathe for 5 seconds, hold it in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds, hold your tension, let it go. It can like reset your brain somehow. I don't know how medically all of that works, unfortunately, but I know it does.
It absolutely does.
Now, for me, my hardest thing is dealing with my relationships right now because I'm at home with my daughter who is normally at school on my days off so that I can get things done that I used to get done and now I can't. And I'm being a school teacher, and I know a lot of people are dealing with aside from all these worries about their melanoma and how COVID affects you, now on top of this, we have all these family dynamics that are a little bit not okay or great. I mean, I'm sure that there are people that are super happy to be home with their family. And I was in that, you alluded to this in the beginning of this webinar. I was in that state where I was like, this is great. I get to have dinner with my family every night. I'm super happy. We don't have things to do. And now I'm like, can you go to school? Like, I love you so much.
Oh no, it's you
time
again.
for school yet?
Yeah.
Who's in charge of teaching you things? So, I mean, I don't know if anybody else is having those kinds of feelings that is listening, but I truly think that's scary.
It is. I don't know. We I don't think are made to live in our modern culture this closely together on top of each other all the time. We have gotten used to lives with a lot of private and individual space. And I think it's extremely, extremely hard. And the other thing in terms of coping under stress is however we tend to cope in ordinary life, under stress, we're going to cope even more. And everybody in a family is going to have different styles of coping. So if somebody is a neatnik, they're running around cleaning the house all the time, while the other person has just got stuff spread out everywhere. If somebody's chatty Cathy, they're going to be talking more while the other person says, I can't talk about this.
Sure.
It's a challenging thing. And
so we have an anonymous question on here that says, how do you educate your friends and family that don't understand that your life, now won't look the same once everything reopens, like maintaining social distancing, keeping people away from, distancing and things like that, wearing a mask. How do you gently, like, what if your Aunt Lucy is like, I can't wait till everything reopens. I'm coming to your house tomorrow. How do you educate people in that sense? Because I mean, I feel like this is going to be a slow, like there was another question further down that was like, things aren't going to open automatically right away. We're going to have to cope with our new normal is going to be stretched out likely over a period of months, so how do we do all that?
Okay. So one thing I just want to say related to what I'm hearing from cancer patients is when people have different feelings about social distancing and not being careful about bringing the groceries into the house, all of those things, I'm finding people, they'll describe to me, I'm just getting enraged at people who are putting my life at danger by not being careful about all these things. So I think there's these feelings of anger about it. Related to how you educate others, and this I think is incredibly challenging, but what I learned when I had my new little baby and I was an anxious mother, unsolicited advice is never helpful. Never.
Right.
Never works. So I think when I look at people, related to advice about what people can do in your space, like, no, you can't come into my space and be close to me. I think you have absolute control and educate people about what you as a cancer patient are comfortable with and what's safe. So we're not right now talking about that. We're talking about the general sense of why don't people get it that the world is different and it's going to be different for a long time. And what I would say about that is it goes back to coping styles. I think that people who don't, quote, get it, it's their way of coping with this enormous stress. Just like my way of coping is I want to anticipate the worst and I want to get it that way. So I think we have to appreciate that the people who, as long as they're not putting you in danger, and that's a different thing, but the people who don't, quote, get it, that's just their belief and way of coping with this stress. And I don't actually find it very helpful to try to educate people because I think it's just going to make them mad. I can say if you're trying to persuade somebody of something, which again, I'm not sure I'm recommending, it may sound weird, but the fastest way to do it is ask them, tell me why you believe what you believe.
Oh, that's great advice.
So so let's just, if I say it to Melissa, why do you believe what you believe? And then you say, well, let's just say because you believe in social distancing. Or why, let's just say it's the opposite. I don't believe in social distancing. So, well, because I think people are being overreactive and it's all the media hype. And then instead of going, oh, but the media's really got it right, you got to listen to the scientists. Now we're just going back and forth. That's not going to go anywhere. So then I say, so tell me why else you think it's really important we start the social distancing. Well, I'm really worried about all the people who are losing their living. This makes me so sad. So tell me why else you think we should open the economy again. The best way to get someone to listen to you is to ask them over and over again why they believe what they believe. And then once they've exhausted all those reasons, you can say, I get it. We're worried about all the people who are losing money. Tell me, I'm frightened that we're also a lot of people will die if we do this. What do you think about that? So believe it or not, that's the best way to change somebody's mind.
And actually, also on top of that too, I found that a lot of times people make blanket statements about how they feel. So like, yeah. I feel angry, I feel scared, I feel really hurt. And what I have found, I feel like I'm a lot in touch with my feelings, but what I have found is that if I ask them, well, why do you feel like that? It makes them feel, so you make another person feel validated about why they feel that way, and that you understand how they feel, but also you're learning the motive behind their action or their thoughts. And I think that makes, understanding perspectives a lot easier, because you are, somebody that maybe thinks that this is all a hoax deep down inside is actually pretty scared that it's actually true. So I think, and I wish that I could have this magic wand that could make everyone be unafraid of communicating, because I think the more open that people are about how they're feeling, the better other people can understand and can support you, but also the better you will feel, because you're not holding all of that in. One of the things that, and this just happened, one of my patients, I had this conversation about, she was extremely worried, like for the 4 or 5 days before she would have her scans. And this goes back to pre-COVID. This is, just preparing for scans. How do I deal with that? Blah, blah, blah. And she had said, I can't function the couple days before my scans. I'm so worked up about it. And I said, okay, 2 things. One, can you change them? And she's like, no. I said, okay, so we know we can't change things that are going to happen. You can do everything you can to control how you feel and how you react and everything else, but you can't change the outcome no matter what. Yeah. The other thing is, and this is a sermon that actually one of our priests gave, is that he said he told somebody to hold a cup of water, and it was just a cup of water, and it only had 8 ounces of water in it. So you could pick that cup of water up and you could hold it, and you could hold it for 5 minutes, and that's no big deal. And you could probably hold it out in front of you for 20 minutes, and that's no big deal. But the longer that you hold that cup out there, AKA worry, the harder it is to cope with that little tiny bit of weight, and that weight overcomes you over time. So pour the water out, drink the water, do something with this water, but don't keep holding this cup of water and not doing anything with it. And I was like, that's my brain is full of, this makes so much sense.
It is. So, it's absolutely great.
I think that could be a really helpful visual, like get it off here, talk to someone. And if you don't have someone to talk to in your family, and you don't feel comfortable talking to your provider, AIM has a really nice service where they do this Peer Connect program. And people don't utilize this enough, but we need both folks to listen and folks to talk. So we need people that have, that are willing to be a buddy for someone, and also people that need a buddy. But it's this great program that, you can get information on our website about, but it matches people of similar disease states to be each other's buddy. And so it's really, really nice because they're, melanoma specific support groups are really tough to come by. And so, it's really thinking outside the box to find ways to get people to have someone to support them if they don't. So it's really nice. What would you say are, looking forward, like, where can we find hope in this situation moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. And how to find hope. And there are two things that come to mind for me. And one, I once heard a lecture about what to do if you're taken hostage. So you're in the Iranian embassy or you're trapped. And the lecture was what you were supposed to do. And in this case, when you're taken hostage, you don't know if you're going to get out in a week or a month or a year or 5 years. And so the advice was, first of all, don't think about how much longer it will be, because you will drive yourself crazy.
Right.
The thing was, have very vivid pictures of what you're going to do when it is over. So picture life post-COVID. And the third thing is, find something meaningful to do every day. And it's not meaning with a big M. It's little meaning, like I'm looking out at the white tree in my backyard right now. It's reaching out to a friend online. I think one is that daily kind of focusing on life at the end, and finding some daily meaning. The other, I think, is drawing from the deep values that are important to you. And I'm 68, so I find myself thinking a lot about what's called the greatest generation, which was my parents' generation. And this was the generation that went through the Depression and World War II. I think all of us have ideas about people in history who've gone through really, really difficult things. And I think we are being called on to draw from the deepest parts of our souls and our values to do something that's extremely hard. And I think trying to do as best a job as one can do is a source of hope in all of this.
Sure. And I think, so we had a question that kind of is really helpful. Tom asks, how important is exercise in coping physically and emotionally with stress elevation when dealing with not only the treatment side effects, but also with isolation? And I think, right now, that could be one thing that you do that has meaning to you every day. You can, take a walk outside in the morning and wear sunscreen, but take a walk outside.
Right. Sunscreen, yes. Oh, the mask is really helpful, huh?
Yeah, it's helpful for sure to keep you safe. But definitely melanoma patients wear sunscreen if you're going to go for a walk outside. But you can exercise in your home. There's lots of online programs and truly, getting endorphins going, and from a medical standpoint, that already lowers your stress threshold. It's a good release. It's great to, kind of change your mood within 15 minutes. So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to run 4 miles or do P90X or some other, crazy workout, but even just a brisk walk, some jumping jacks, chasing your child around your house are very helpful, I think. In dealing with some of that pent up anxiety too.
And I also want to put in a plug for people who don't feel well or who have never enjoyed exercise, because we can get talking about relationships, you get battles in families. You should be doing more. And, I think the important thing about exercise is exercise can actually be walk out of your front door. If you like to exercise, do it. I like to exercise, but just walk out of your front door, sit on the front steps, and sit up straight and look at the street. That's exercise. It's getting up off the couch and doing something. So it does not have to be vigorous to be meaningful.
Sure. What about, there's a question on here from a person named Morella. I don't want to get your name wrong, so I'm sorry if I said it wrong. She says she's a 12-year melanoma survivor. Next Friday, she'll be taking a coronavirus test, not because she has symptoms, but she has allergies and the doctor's recommending the test, but she's scared. And she doesn't know if it's because she's scared, like PTSD from the melanoma part, or if she is worried just about like, how's the test going to go, things like that. So in terms of, and I think this mainly goes to prepping for, like, I'm going to go get a COVID test, but I'm freaking out in my car. What should I do in that immediate minute?
Yeah. So I think two things, and one, I just want to say realistically, any past, any current, when you're going through any current stressor, it's going to bring up past stressors. So that's just realistic. But I'm picturing this getting the diagnosis for COVID, which is scary, is also going to involve flashbacks to the initial diagnosis of melanoma or that period of anxiety. So I think one is just realizing there are going to be these periods of heightened anxiety. Related to worrying and the time ahead of time, actually, when you're in, going to the hospital, doing all those things, deep breathing, distracting music, anything you can do to distract yourself. Something I've found that's helpful in terms of worrying with a scheduled event. So what day was this test? It's gonna.
I closed it, but I think it's like next week or tomorrow or something like that. So
let's just theoretically say, what's today, Wednesday? Let's say the test is on Friday, but you can do this for anything. You can worry 24/7 until Friday when you get the test, and then another 24 hours until you get the results. But I think all of us would agree there's no value in worrying for 3 days. So what you do is, quote, schedule the worry. So if the test is at 8 o'clock on Friday morning, you say to yourself, every time you start to worry on Wednesday and Thursday, I will start worrying when I wake up on Friday morning, or I will start worrying on Thursday night. So instead of worrying for 3 days, you cut down the worry to 12 hours or so. So that's another strategy.
And use all your strategies. Distract yourself, exercise, hug your people you're in quarantine with, do anything you can to get yourself to think about something else until your scheduled time to worry. I think this has been amazing. I think that
because I just want to say Melissa is as amazing as she appears on screen. She's like this in real life.
Well, thank you for that. I just think that in general, communicate, talk to your providers, tell them how you're feeling, ask for help, because this is a scary time. It's a scary time in melanoma. It's a scary time in the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty. Arm yourself with facts. Know that you're not alone, but ask for help when you need it, because there is somebody like me out there that is willing to say, this is what the facts are. This is the reality of your situation. You don't need to worry, or you do need to worry, but I'll always tell the truth. I unfortunately have a lack of lying ability, which is both my detriment and a bonus, but I will always tell the truth. So, you can always reach out to me if there's no one else to ask if you're at risk or if you need something. So know that people are out there for you. And I think a good summary of all of the coping strategies are distraction, take deep breaths, clench and unclench. There's lots of really great techniques. You can go back and watch this video to kind of review all of those things. Ellen, I really love you, and I hope that we get to do this again sometime. I know that I have a lot of other things in my brain, and hopefully we can collaborate again in the future soon. We are also going to do a couple of more videos like this. One is going to address the NCCN guidelines about how recommendations about surgery are changing, because that's a big one. Some surgeries are being delayed. People are really nervous about it. We're going to get someone to come on line and talk about with me and kind of talk about how surgery is changing in light of COVID, and what that means to the patient. And then we have another one where we're going to talk with a medical oncologist from the systemic treatment side of things. So I think hopefully, we're going to fuel everyone with lots of facts, and so that everyone feels really empowered with all the knowledge, and things become a lot less scary when you kind of have an explanation for why doctors are recommending certain things. So, but yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you very much for coming on
Loved
with us.
it. Oh, I love doing it. And to all of you out there, just send good thoughts to you as you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with.
Yay. If there's anything else we can do for you, you can always reach me on the Ask an Expert hotline, or you can submit a question to me online from the AIM at Melanoma website as well. And if it's something in relationship to Ellen, I'm sure that she will help me answer the question after the fact. So I hope everyone has a absolutely wonderful evening. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.